Everybody, my name is Ashley Place. I'm the Communications and Cultural Events Coordinator for the town of Ashland. Here I am sitting with virtually Evan White, the project engineer and the director of stormwater operations for the town of Ashland. And we have our friend Rob St Germain. He's been a resident of Ashland for the past 20 years. He's the former chair of Stormwater Committee, and he's also a member of the Town Forest Committee. And we're here to talk to you about some stormwater education and how important it is and how it influences your daily life as a resident. So, Evan.
Thanks, Ashley. First and foremost, just want to talk a little bit. A lot of people have a misconception about stormwater and sewer. They're actually very different. Sewer is raw sewage. It gets sent to a treatment plant, gets treated, cleaned, and then put back into the system. The stormwater is different. It's straight, just clean rainwater that gets discharged to wetlands and water bodies. So anybody that's dumping stuff down into the storm drains is actually polluting the environment. So I just wanted to make that clear first. Secondly, the reason we're doing this is because of the EPA's MS4 permit, which MS4 stands for municipally separate storm sewer system. And that permit requires cities and towns in the United States with sufficient population density to get the permit to be able to discharge water from their roadways and facilities. So there's a bunch of things that come with that. There's public education aspects. We have goals and we have to report to the EPA what kind of messages we're sending out, how many people viewed them, things of that nature. We also are required to do monitoring of our stormwater system. We have to inspect and clean out all the catch basins in town. So we have about 2,400, I believe. We have to make sure that they stay below 50% full. So each catch basin has a sump, and the purpose of that sump is to collect solids and let them settle out so they don't just get discharged to water and streams, because that can have a polluting effect as well. So we have to make sure that we keep up with cleaning them, make sure that the sumps are clean and below 50% full. We also have an IDDE program that we had to establish, which IDDE stands for Illicit Discharge Detection and Elimination. And that program requires us to do dry and wet weather testing of our stormwater outfalls, of which we have 290 in town. An outfall is a discharge point into a wetland or a water body. So we have town personnel that go around. They have testing equipment and sampling equipment, and they go and they take samples. If they detect something that shouldn't be there, if they see an odor or they see like an oil sheen or something in the water coming out of an outfall, and then we're required to test it. We send it to a lab. Some equipment we can test on the spot to see if there's anything illicit in there. But basically, the idea of the program is we are to test, detect, and eliminate sources of pollution. And and that's kind of what we're doing here. Rob, if you want to talk about the origins of the enterprise fund and the fees and rates, I'll hand it off to you.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. How this thing came about, stormwater, as Evan said, there's a separate set of pipes in the ground. And historically, this was handled by highway department if a culvert collapsed and something like that. Like many small towns, we weren't doing a lot proactively. It was more reactively. So, you know, if we had a heavy storm and a culvert failed, the highway department would go out and fix it, that type of thing. About 40 years or so ago, the United States Congress created the Environmental Protection Agency. And one of the things that the Environmental Protection Agency did was take a look at stormwater as a source of pollution. And things evolved over the years. And at some point in time, towns were required to have a permit to have the town's stormwater flow into what are referred to as the waters of the United States. And about now 7 years ago, this permit was due for a renewal. This is a permit, generally a 5-year permit that gets turned over, that each town has to qualify for with the Environmental Protection Agency. So about 7 years ago, the conservation agent, whose name was Matt Selby at the time, recommended the creation of a Stormwater Citizen Committee called SWAC, or Stormwater Advisory Committee. The reason he did that was this new permit that Evan mentioned, the MS4 permit, was a stronger, more demanding, more expensive permit. And it was going to require the town to do a lot more than it had been doing. And Selby's recommendation was that the Stormwater Committee be charged with deciding how to fund this and what the town's response would be. So a committee was formed, and I was asked to be on it because I have some engineering, civil engineering in my background, as well as an MBA in finance. And this was a big financial kind of issue. And so the committee really worked very long and hard to look at all the various alternatives that it could do, that it could take, as well as what other towns were doing. And one of the things we discovered was that both the EPA and the state, and when I say the state, I'm saying the state Department of Environmental Protection, as well as the state finance director's office, recommend the use of an enterprise fund for something like stormwater. We have one for sewer, we have one for water, and there's a couple others in town. The purpose of the enterprise fund is almost like a separate business within the town, a separate accounting system that allows to isolate the expenses of certain activities and provide certain transparency to the citizenry. And so we made the recommendation, we being SWAC, the Stormwater Advisory Committee, the Citizen Committee, made the recommendation to the town and first to the select board and then ultimately at town meeting. And town meeting agreed and created the Stormwater Enterprise Fund. And under that, we have Evan, who's the town engineer and director of the stormwater utility. So that got at least the business, if you will, created. And then the question was, well, how do you fund it? And a very common method of funding is to look at impervious area. Impervious area is any area such as a driveway, a street, a roof, that water doesn't permeate, doesn't go into and go back to the water table. And so we started looking at impervious area and issuing a fee based on impervious area for each piece of property in town. And there was a whole bunch of pushback on that from homeowners that caused us to really look closely at what their particular issues were. And based on those particular issues, which were things like, well, my house is down from the street and sometimes the street water flows to my house, you should be paying me, you know, and in all of those kinds of issues, which were valid points, but they were also a little bit misleading. Because what the fee is really paying for is a contribution by everyone for their share of the stormwater that falls on the town and what we're going to do with it. So anyway, the committee decided to use a flat fee, and the flat fee of $8.75 per quarter, and it's tacked on to the water and the sewer bill. And that's for homeowners. And for commercial properties and commercial rental properties, we have a rate based on impervious area, and they pay so much per square foot of a parking lot. So when you go to Market Basket or you go to Shaw's, okay, those properties are paying based on their impervious area. And the money goes into a fund, and that fund is what enables Evan and his crew to now be more proactive in terms of, is the town polluting? Where is the pollution coming from? And proactive in terms of, we're inspecting these storm basins that Evan talked about and what condition that they are in. Should we take corrective action before the storm drain fails and pollutes that stream or something like that? So the town now, let's see, we're into the third year, right, Evan? And I think the town, I had to, for personal reason, recently resigned from the Stormwater Committee a couple of months ago, but the town, I know from my experience working on this for the last 5 years, is in a lot better shape now than it's ever been in terms of being environmentally responsible about its stormwater. I'd like to add one thought. And that thought is, when the town sends out a survey to the various citizens in town, that survey always comes back saying that the townspeople as a whole want to be environmentally responsible. They want this to be a good town to live in, the town that lives up to its responsibilities and cares about the environment. And so this is very much, this whole stormwater thing is very much consistent with that. And if I could take about 20 seconds more, I just wanted to dispel one thing that I heard in the rumor mill last summer, and that was, oh my goodness, we're in a drought. Why do we have to pay a stormwater fee? And the answer to that is the stormwater work is ongoing. Whether we have floods or whether we have droughts, the testing needs to take place. The chasing down of possible sources of pollution has to take place. The maintenance has to take place. We still have to clean the streets. So there's a lot happening, regardless of whether the rain is 1 inch or 5. So anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell.
I do have one question for both of you. You spoke about how the stormwater fee regards maintenance. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are some neighboring towns that had huge infrastructure issues because of their lack of maintenance. Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know too much about other towns. I do know that Worcester spends about $1 million a year just for catch basin cleaning. Ashland's not really even close to that number, but some cities and towns are going to be in worse shape because of lack of maintenance over the years. That would not surprise me.
Everybody needs to realize that whether we like it or not, we are all polluters.
Right.
Okay. Every time we drive our car on the street, we are causing pollution. And that pollution on the streets, and not even thinking about litter, and hopefully everybody's being careful about that, but fallen leaves, broken branches, car pollution, drops of oil, wear and tear from the tires, that all ends up in the storm drains. And if you don't clean those storm drains on a regular basis, you're going to have failure, you're going to have pollution. If you don't check your culverts on a regular basis, there is wear and tear, there is settling, culverts are going to fail. So again, going back to my other comment, I think we're in a lot better shape as a town, and less chance of inconveniences from streets being blocked off because of our proactive stance.
Well, thank you very much. I think this was incredibly important. piece of education for some individuals. I know I learned a lot from this, and I appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you, Ashley.
Thank you, Ashley. Thanks, Rob.